Hello, my fine friends, and welcome to episode 3 of Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, the CMO for Visit Myrtle Beach, and I'm joined today with my partner in crime, Adam Stoker. That's when you
Hey,
say hello,
excited for
Adam.
today. I'm
Let's
still
have a little
learning.
more.
I'm
Come on,
still learning.
come on. This is where
You
you
know what,
like really
Stuart?
sell it, man.
I am thrilled to join you today for another episode of Destination Discourse. Thank you, all those that are listening, for being here. Really excited to chat with you today. How's that? Did I do okay?
That's much better. I mean, I only took 3 episodes to get you to that level. But so you don't get too comfortable, I figured we'd start by shaking things up. And we got our first ever guest on the show. And so 10 years from now, when we're like 10 seasons in and people are doing Trivial Pursuit games based on this show, one of the questions might be, who was the first ever guest on Destination Discourse? And I'm proud to say that it is a good friend of mine and visionary and fellow troublemaker, Will Seccombe. Welcome to the show, Will.
Hey, Stuart, thanks for having me. Adam, great to see you again. It's fun to be here. I guess I can't screw up too much because I've followed Adam's career and Destiny and his other podcasts. At least we know the third one will be the least viewed of all of them. So I can't go too wrong, right?
I think we're going to be just fine. And the worst thing that can happen, I've always told people this, when you create a show, a podcast of any kind, the worst thing that can happen is no one listens, and then it doesn't matter what you say. So
Right.
we'll be totally fine. Now I'm going to set up the topic today. You haven't seen the show yet, Will, but there's a format. We're going to talk about set up the topic, then we're going to do what's the industry is calling the best segment in all of entertainment. It's called Stu's News. And then we're going to actually dig into the topic. Does that sound good to you?
That works for me.
All right. So I'll start with a little story. So the topic today is, why don't DMOs take risks? And I got to tell you, when I first joined the industry 3 years ago, and I was called a troublemaker, and we were trying to do some innovative things here at Visit Myrtle Beach, there was some cautionary tales out there. And this name kept coming up, and people kept saying, well, there were people like you before, and it didn't end well for those people. And I would disagree with that. I feel like it ended pretty well for some of those people. And we are standing on the shoulders of one of those giants here today with Will, who was a trailblazer at Visit Florida and throughout his career. And so you were that cautionary tale. I heard this thing about Pitbull several times that we might dig into a little bit later. But if you're game for that, that's the setup for later on, Will. Does that sound fair?
Fair enough.
All right. So let's go into the favorite segment in all of entertainment. It's Stu's News. We're going to need a jingle for this at some point, Adam. But today's Stu's News comes. It was originally going to be from Ad Age. I got to admit this, but Ad Age has it's got a firewall, right? Because you have to have a password to read Ad Age. So I'm like, I don't want to give an article that people have to sign up for. So I went and found another version of this, but it's from Design Rush. And this is back from May, but I hadn't heard this until I was snooping around for Stu's News today. And this comes from Kentucky Tourism. And they actually created, I thought this was apt for today's topic, they created a video game called Great Big Kentucky Adventure. And it's a 2D platformer, very similar to a Mario. And they even went as far on their landing page to create what looks like a Super Nintendo Entertainment System video game case. But this is really fun because they have 12 levels, and they're each based on a location within Kentucky. So it's educational. And what the article says is the CEO of that organization was inspired on a trip with his family where he noticed that his kids were too interested in video games and not experiencing the destination they were in. And so that was sort of the kernel of an idea that generated this game. But I played it. I don't know if you guys have, but wanted to throw this out there today as inspiration for our topic and just see what you think about, should DMOs be creating video games? What do you guys think?
Will, I'll let you go first.
I thought that was great, and I appreciate you sharing it. It's again, I think it's kind of taking that culture of innovation and reality of kind of how life works and how kids are learning, and the fact that as the story said, his kids were just staring at their video games and not paying attention to the outside, or not paying attention to the history and the culture of the destination they were visiting. And I think it's a one great avenue for targeting kids. I think from an adult standpoint, I just got back from a trip as well, and I can't tell you how much my vacation experience was enhanced by using AI. Just taking pictures of monuments, taking pictures of statues, taking pictures of buildings, and learning about the history of them. You didn't have to go find a historical marker. It's at your fingertips. And I think that is kind of how we're going to evolve to finding out more information and discovering about places. So I think it's a great entree, and it's really ultimately kind of a new way of discovery. And, not once in my vacation, I'm guessing these kids wouldn't ever go to a destination website as they're traveling, but there's other ways to discover and find new information. So I think it's a great idea. It's a super cool concept. And I think it's on the cusp of something about, how to teach people about where they are and what's available and what all they can do.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Adam, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll start with the fact that anytime I see a destination do something that's not just a catchy headline, a pretty picture, and a paid media distribution plan as their core campaign strategy, with different audiences, we have to meet them where they are. And if kids are spending a lot of their time playing video games and are not necessarily paying attention to the destination when they're traveling, or to the, especially when you're on a long road trip with the kids, sometimes you're like, look out the window, and they don't even stop what they're doing to look out the window at what you're driving by, right? And so the idea, and I think this is also a risk, the idea of creating a game is a really smart idea because we're trying to meet the audience where they are. And so I think Kentucky, kudos to them for having a sound strategy. I would love to have more information, for example, of how did they distribute the game and make sure that enough, kids got the opportunity to play it? What kind of feedback did they get on the game? And of course, I know it's a fairly fresh campaign, so we may not have all that information yet. Those are some questions that I would ask, but outside looking in at a high level, for one, the fact that they took a major risk that, stakeholders are going to say, well, how does this translate into sales? If you create something like that and the stakeholders are asking that question, it's a risk. And so I really like that. And then the second thing that I would say is, without knowing the full strategy, it seems like a great way to meet an emerging audience, and especially an audience that will eventually be your core audience where they are, which I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, and open invitation. If anyone from Kentucky is watching this, we should probably reach out to them, Adam, and have them on the show at a later date and have them talk about the results of this campaign, because I think it is very innovative. It's certainly something we've thought about at Myrtle Beach, is how do we intersect with video games in a way that makes sense. What I love about these type of ideas is not only do you generate the awareness directly through the thing, but the earned media opportunity is tremendous. I mean, it isn't very often that DMOs get written up in Ad Age, right? I mean, we've had it probably once or twice actually in the same week for the same campaign since I've been here. And so to stand out, you have to do something bold like this. And the earned media they got was tremendous. Now, if you want to go play this game, it's at greatbigkyadventure.com. You can go play this. It's a browser game. That's the one thing. If I'm just, I don't know if they've got future plans for this. I would love to see a DMO, and maybe it'll be Visit Myrtle Beach. I don't know, but I would love to see a DMO really take it to the next level and launch a proper video game on a major platform. Not just sort of, this is great, I love it, but it's sort of a gimmick in that it's trying to get that earned media, right? But could you go the next level and actually create embedded entertainment in the form of a video game? There are other brands that have done it, right? There are brands like Lego that have done it. Micro Machines have done it for years. So I'd love to see someone take this concept and really evolve it to the next level. But it's really cool. It's bold. Would love to learn more about it. So let's pencil that in for a future episode. So let's segue into this, because I think that that sets us up nicely to talk about taking risks. Obviously, someone there at Kentucky had to have a conversation with someone that was probably initially a hard no. We're not going to create a video game. That's not an appropriate use of taxpayers' dollars. And they did a good job convincing those stakeholders that it in fact was. And That's what I've spent a lot of my first couple of years doing with our board of directors and our local elected officials, is educating them on the long game and the big strategy that we're trying to do. And that's enabled us to do things like podcasts and TV shows and other innovative stuff. But I'd like to start with you, Will. Give us a little bit of your bio, your background on the DMO side before you jump to the dark side of being a vendor for the DMO space. Tell us sort of what led you down that path and what risks you took along the way. And ultimately, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about the Pitbull story at Visit Florida.
So yeah, started in the DMO space years and years ago. I was the first ever vice president of marketing at Denver Convention Bureau. Ended up working on the Colorado tourism account before I came to Visit Florida as the CMO for 5 years, president, CEO for 5 years after that. So spent a lot of time at the city level, state level, on destination marketing. And I was really fortunate at Denver. One of the big challenges that they gave us was the city gave us $100,000 for a consumer marketing campaign, and the goal was to leverage it to $1 million, right? And so, my initial foray into kind of innovation and risk taking was a direct challenge at the time, right? How do you turn $100,000 into $1 million campaign? Well, you've got to be innovative. You got to create a culture of experimentation. You got to have this kind of concept of partner value, and you have to have a really, really solid plan that the industry partners, stakeholders, politicians, everybody can get in around and understand that. So it really launched a platform for how do you do big things and bold things. At the time, and I'm in between there, I worked at an ad agency that did Colorado tourism. And again, the challenge is how to be innovative. And I that's when the first thing came out and said, all tourism advertising is art, culture, shopping, dining, fun for the whole family. But you laugh and you say, everybody does it. I know every ad agency probably does it in every DMO pitch and says,
I was going to say, you just stole our tagline, man.
Yeah, right. And my joke at the time was, Palm Beach had figured it out because their logo then was the best of everything. So they skipped, art, culture, shopping, dining, fun for the whole family. They were just the best of everything.
Yeah, we're all things to all people.
Yeah,
especially people that ride stuff, right?
Lowest common denominator.
Have you noticed that every commercial that's ever been produced by DMO, people are riding things? You ever seen that? It might be a horse, it might be a jet ski, it might be a snowmobile, a bicycle, but they're always like, I challenge you, next time you're at a DMO conference and looking at the latest, greatest commercial, someone's riding something. It's a bingo card game for sure. Sorry, I segue.
Well, no, and I think that's so true. And so, that has kind of led throughout my career into saying, how do you be innovative? How do you tell stories that are real, that are, there's nothing worse than saying, the authentic, we're authentic, because anytime you say that, it's not the truth, right? So, but how do you go about creating and innovating and coming up with new ways to tell the story? At Visit Florida, we were probably the first destination that hired an editor. So we had a editor we hired from the St. Pete Times to create content and tell stories. We had insiders that were telling personal, kind of telling the personal stories along different tracks, really pushing the ideas of how to be more compelling in telling stories. And that has always been kind of one of the features of kind of my view of destination marketing and how to do it the best. And it's always better to have real people telling the story of your destination and then, just copy, like you said, when it's art, culture, shopping, dining, fun for the whole family.
So can I ask you a question, Will?
Yeah.
Are you saying that you can't manufacture authenticity? I mean, that's such a controversial statement in this industry.
And I don't think so, can you? But
yeah, obviously I'm being ironic, right? I mean, we joke about it internally about we call it authenticity, right? That's what we're trying to do. But there's so many folks try to fabricate authenticity. Hey, if we do this, it'll look like that's a real family. Or let's bring together these 4 people because they look like a family. You know what's a lot better for a photo shoot than casting a family is actually getting a family that have a good relationship with each other to have a good time and take photos of it. Way more effective. So
and it's funny, Stuart, and I appreciate your risk taking, but that's what led to Undiscovered America TV. So, right, how do you create a television show that is more than just kind of advertorial, but to talk to real people and real destinations about why this is such a great community. And it's not necessarily talking to the brew pub owner at talking about what beers they're making. It's more talking about why they're investing in the community, what in the community makes it a special place to live, work, and play. And those authentic conversations with real people talking about why they love a place is really comes across great on television.
Yeah, we sort of use the 3 Ps when we're talking about storytelling here at Visit Myrtle Beach. We talk about people, passion, and purpose. If you can capture one or multiple of those in a story, then someone's gonna pay attention to it, And I think what you've done with Undiscovered America, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think it's been innovative for the industry because your approach is completely different than any other show that is pitched us, because a lot of it is infomercial. It's not storytelling. And so we, obviously, full disclaimer, we did an episode in season 1 of Undiscovered America, and it was really successful for us. Some of the greatest content and some of the best comments we've gotten from our community from that too. But let's get back to your Visit Florida days and talk a little bit about that journey.
No, so Visit Florida, obviously, good and the bad risk taking, right? So one of the best things I ever did at Visit Florida, and probably ended up being one of it led to my demise, was getting the governor to challenge us to get to 100 million visitors. When I got to Visit Florida, the budget was pretty flat and stagnant. Significant, $25 to $35 million. Visitation basically was 85 million visitors a year. And it had popped around 85 million visitors for 8-9 years. No real growth, maybe a little here, a little there, ups and downs. But our challenge was to get to 100 million visitors and get the resources necessary to do that. So we did get the governor.
What year was that, Will? How long ago was that?
I gotta go back. It's been a while.
But that seemed to be the shtick at the time, right? Everyone was about how many heads and beds can we get? How many visitors can we get? And I feel like that's evolved now. It's a little more nuanced, and folks are too worried about over tourism, and they're more focused on quality visits versus the number of visitors. I think Myrtle Beach went through that evolution. When I joined, the previous rallying cry had been 20 million by 2020. We wanted 20 million visitors a year by 2020, and we hit it. And then people started saying, well, now what? And then they realized, well, just because we're getting the heads in bed doesn't mean that we're improving the quality of life for the local residents, which is what our primary role is. And so we've actually, over the last 3 years, taken a much more nuanced approach, and we focus on that quality visit of folks that want to book earlier, stay longer, spend more, leave less of a footprint, but want to come back and tell all their friends to come and behave the appropriate way, And so that's been a lot more of a positive message for our local residents and our stakeholders than the previous one of just, hey, we want heads in beds.
Heads in beds. Yeah, and then that's an evolution that really, I think, has been fantastic for the industry in itself, right? Is to shift, what's the economic impact? At the time, the conversations at a DI board meeting they're about economic impact. They were about spending and kind of all of that, but it was never the first question was what's best for my community. And I think that's what's happened to the industry has really evolved, is saying, all right, how do I serve and keep my community as healthy and happy and rewarded as possible? And that's the purpose of tourism, not necessarily just bringing the heads and beds and the spending. But clearly at the time, it's like, how do we get past this stagnation and really start to grow the economic impact of tourism in the state of Florida? And that led to a lot of very innovative things. Part of our deal with, again, in a public-private partnership, you have this really good or bad relationship with the public sector. And at the time, Visit Florida had come under attack when I first got there for being boring and just doing little summer ad campaign, winter ad campaign, and that was kind of it. And we were challenged to be bold, and that was a great thing, and that led to some really cool marketing programs that were really, really successful, very highly targeted, impactful programs that were out of the box. We sponsored.
Are there any that stand out to you, Will, from those early days?
Yeah, we were the sponsor of the Fulham Football Club in UK. And it was, we're jersey sponsors. It was our biggest and most important international market. Got a ton of great PR and media out of it. As you flew into Heathrow, you fly past the stadium, and it had a big little Visit Florida on the flight pass. Everybody flying into Heathrow would see the Visit Florida message. So really innovative program, and one of our biggest markets. It was probably the first destination to sponsor an international football club.
Yeah.
Now,
but not the last, right? You inspired others. I know Tampa's done it. I think
Tampa's done it.
Visit Kissimmee is doing it this year with Brighton. So
yeah.
It's definitely smart. If coming from the UK, I would love to do it if we had more of an international presence here in Myrtle Beach. But I think it makes a lot of sense for Florida destinations.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here. Isn't that fascinating? Because if we're talking about one of the risks that Will took, and I know you're about to get to that, Will, that eventually led to, as you defined it, Will, your demise. And yet several of the things that you did while you were in your role, because you were being innovative, that legacy is now carried on to multiple destinations, copying components of your strategy. And so, yes, of course, the situation that led to your demise that you're going to tell us about was painful for the public sector, especially when you went through it. But so many of the things, the risks that you took, have now been copied and perpetuated by other destinations, which is a signal that the willingness to take risks that you had a major impact, not only on Visit Florida, but on the industry as a whole.
Yeah. No, and I think, again, if it's taking risks to address an important cause, not just doing something for the sake of doing it or some crazy idea, but if you're driving towards a goal and looking for innovative solutions to accomplish that aren't necessarily, like you said, Adam, earlier in the conversation, just the paid media campaigns that are simple and safe, right? You do your digital campaign, you get your impressions back, and you get some clicks, and that's great. You're not being memorable. I think back about one of the best tourism campaigns I remember ever seeing that I wish me or my team would have come up with was the 18 Summers campaign. You have 18 summers for a family vacation before your kids move out of the house. The message of that was so strong. For years and years, I could never remember who did it. I think it's Visit Idaho did it. But again, powerful message that actually transcended, at least in my mind, the brand that it was representing. But so I think, again, if you have a really solid message, you have an audience that you're really trying to target. So we wouldn't just go in and sponsor a football club unless we were trying to figure out innovative ways to go in and raise our exposure in a really crowded market, which is the UK, right? That is probably one of the most competitive international feeder markets in the world. So you had to do something bigger and bolder than, subway ads, right? You got to capture the attention and create passion. So that's what led to that. Another campaign.
Let's talk about what got you in trouble, Will. I'm on pins and needles here.
Looking at the numbers, the state of Florida was the #1 destination for all generations, all generation travelers, all kind of ethnicities, right? #1 destination for everybody except for we were Gen Z, or millennials, we were #2 behind California, and Hispanics, we were #2 behind California. So our goal was to figure out how can we be #1 across all demos and all audiences. And that led to this idea. Pitbull wrote a song. And through some connections, we ended up with this concept or pitch from Pitbull to write, produce, perform Sexy Beaches. Sexy Beaches was the song, and it integrated our Love FL message, #LoveFL, lots of cool stuff. Pitbull produced it. We paid for it, and then he did all the distribution. And we got some, some commitments to show up and do some events. We got a few things, but he was actually the one promoting it. So Visit Florida never ran the music video on the website, never put it in our social media. We had nothing to do with it. We were using Pitbull for his talent, his exposure, his influence, and his audience to go out and to push that. Ironically, it did get, I was CEO at the time, so we ran it by the governor's office. I presented it to the legislature that year, said, unfortunately, because we got a really, really good deal, probably, 4x what the value of that was from Pitbull. So I presented to the legislature, presented to the governor. That was all cool. In fact, that year, the speaker, or the head of budget in the House of Representatives, we ended up getting $2 million more that year, or for the next year, as a result. So that was all great until that same gentleman was the Speaker of the House and decided to run for governor, and realized by attacking Pitbull and the governor and he were at odds. So he attacked us to get in the media, and it was a very effective earned media campaign, using us as the kind of the scapegoat. Despite the fact that the year prior we got $2 million more after we presented it to everybody. So, but it became kind of untenable for the governor and everybody else fighting to hear about Pitbull. Somebody had to go, and that ended up being the team. Flashback, I was actually with the CMO at the time of Visit Florida the other day, and he said, I just went to YouTube, looked up Sexy Beaches, 44 million views of that organically, of that music video.
Oh my Lord.
Was never
Brutal.
released. It was just out on on Pitbull's social media channels. And so yeah, check it out, Sexy Beaches. It's $44 million. So the ROI on that is probably one of the best tourism marketing ROIs ever.
Yeah. Now, when you're Googling that, you need to be very careful with your spelling. I just want to make sure that everybody's that's listening. It's VEACHES, and just make sure you get that right in your Google search.
That's a good cautionary warning. One of the things that people said to me early on when I joined this industry was, all it takes is one disgruntled elected official in the house of cards can fall down. And I think that's exactly what we saw there. So let's, I want this show to, to be helpful to the next generation of DMO marketers that are wanting to take risks, and, hopefully we can help them avoid some of the struggles that we faced getting to where we are. But what would you have done differently now, knowing how things turned out? Would you have still done that campaign, or would you have approached it differently?
Do you know, I don't think there's anything we could have done different. We got, like I said, got approval from the governor's office, presented it to the House and the Senate. So we did all the things the right way, ran it through all the filters. You just can't get, you can't get outside of politics when politics is, and all too often DMOs come under attack in election years, right? Because again, if you're successful and you're high profile and you're doing good stuff, you're in the news. People locally know about you, and they know that you're spending money driving change, and it becomes a pretty good attack, a target for attack. So, and you'll see that most time destination folks get into trouble. It's something around an election year. There's also a cycle, at least in Florida. My first year there, they zeroed out our budget, told us we were boring and doing everything wrong. 8 years later, same thing happened. So I mean, there's a challenge.
There's definitely a pendulum that swings, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's one thing you could have done differently. You should have put all of the legislature in the video and played to their ego, and then they couldn't have criticized it, right?
That's right.
Always play to their ego.
I think you're going to get attacked if you don't do anything. You can get attacked if you do things too many bold initiatives. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be successful, you've got to kind of build that culture of experimentation. where
Yeah.
you're willing to try. And everything doesn't have to be big, $1 million, sponsorship deals. I actually laughed. I don't know if you saw in the paper, but Florida International University just cut a deal with Pitbull, and they named the stadium after it's now Pitbull Stadium. I'm thinking, now there's a guy that's got a lot of cojones, because knowing everything that Pitbull came with. But
It's some baggage for sure.
yeah,
But
so
I think as we try to do anything that's innovative or new, I think to Adam's point earlier, you definitely paved the way with some of the campaigns you ran, and people are obviously copying that, because the second guy that comes along and does a campaign has a lot less risk once they've seen it work. And that's one of the problems in our industry, right? Is we wait to see if someone else is successful, and then we just copy it and duplicate it. But I think we're realizing as an industry, at least we are at Visit Myrtle Beach, and I'm seeing others realizing that local buy-in to what you're doing, and that recognition of the value that you drive to the community is your defensive shield against some of these criticisms. Because if you have the local business community, the local residents, and the majority of the local officials engaged from the beginning on the campaigns that you're doing, especially the more risky ones that you've sort of built brick by brick over the course of a couple of years, once they understand the deep strategy behind it, and where it's rooted, and how it actually impacts the community, then they'll defend it, right? And I think what happens sometimes, and obviously happened with this Pitbull thing, is it became a flashpoint for two individuals, but you didn't have a bunch of people standing up to defend it. And so, what we try to do is engage people early on in ideas and say, hey, we're thinking about this. Tell us your concerns. Hey, we've tried this. This was the result. What do you think? And so the more we engage, the more people defend. If we just share ideas out there, they're going to attack us. They're going to criticize. But if we engage them early on from the beginning, they're going to defend us along the way.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think, sorry, I'll add one more thing here. I actually think it's really important for those that are listening, though, because this cautionary tale here of what happened with Pitbull is, in my mind, something that could dissuade our listener from being willing to take a risk. And so we have some sort of a rubric by which people can evaluate which risks are worth taking and which risks are not. And of course, we can't insulate everybody from a bad outcome. That's impossible, especially with some of the political issues, Will, like you mentioned, that you got all the approvals ahead of time. But how do you evaluate which risks are worth taking, and how can our audience kind of take away from this some sort of guide to be able to evaluate risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, again, it's building that to your point of having your industry bought in. So you have to have everybody kind of marching in the right direction, right? And understanding what the goals are, what the strategies are that you're trying to implement. Again, in the state of Florida, we were able to build that for 8 years of kind of, it's like constantly talking to an audience. I had a great piece of advice saying, you're not talking to an audience, you're talking to a parade. You have to get it, you have to repeat it so many times to get everybody on board and bought in. And, at the time we did have an amazing buy-in from our industry and our board. But again, when the governor makes the call, there's not a lot you can do. But I think it's really, really important to, again, have a set of fundamentals that everybody buys into. And in our cases, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. We had a laundry list of strategic marketing principles that everybody in the industry understood. And there was, 6 or 8 of them that they're still in use today, by and large, at Visit Florida. But it's understanding what those principles are, understanding what the lane is that you're attacking, and then what the outcome is. Over the course of time at Visit Florida, we knew it. We had every marketing program that we were doing and what our anticipated results were going to be. And so I think that's one of the things, is setting out goals for each of those initiatives and really over communicate them. In the case of the Pitbull one, it's, hey, we've got to really drive in on the younger folks, Hispanic American audience, and kind of that hip crowd that we were not seen as cool. We were not the cool destination in that generation. So how do you be cool? It's not by running digital ads across all social media. It's doing something that's going to be impactful and have long-term results. And so when you communicate that, this isn't just, hey, we're awestruck by this celebrity. It's, hey, we're attacking this audience, and this is the best way to do it. And if you do that and communicate it up front, I think you really, get away from a lot of that challenge when you're dealing with stakeholders. And I think, to Stuart's point earlier, it's getting your stakeholders bought in to the program before it's, out and announced, to the industry. And I think that's a critical step in any of these initiatives. But if you communicate what you're trying to accomplish, and you come up with a lot of really cool ideas on how you can do it outside of just traditional media buys targeting that audience, I think it's worth trying and giving it a shot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We sort of have a similar principle to you guys. Every idea that comes, we have to ladder it back up to our strategic pillars or strategic objectives, right? And say, okay, we want to move the needle here specifically, and this is going to do this XYZ. And so then from there, you can sort of develop some specific goals. But the sort of three things we look at with any decision: one is what kind of resource are we going to have to put into it? How much effort, energy, time, financial resources are we going to put into it? What's the potential upside outcome? Right, that's the second thing. So we use the phrase a lot: is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the effort we put in worth the output that we get from it? But then we also layer on, what are the downsides? What are the potential risks? What are the potential pitfalls? I said pitfalls, not pit bulls. What are the potential casualties? The phrase we use a lot is, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. And that was a French philosopher that came up with that phrase. It's a longer statement than that, but basically it means for everything that you do with good intent, there's always unforeseen consequences. So when you invented the ship, your intent was for people to enjoy waters. But now you've invented the possibility of having a shipwreck, right? When you invent the plane, you invent the plane crash. And so every new idea has potential shipwrecks. You've just got to try to understand what they are. You're going to alienate some of your constituents? So you're going to specifically alienate an elected official because they have a specific hot button or something like that? Are you going to potentially get backlash from the internet, which is a bigger risk each and every day as people become more selectively outraged about every little thing? And so we look at those three things. Is juice worth the squeeze? So is the input worth the output? What is the potential output? And then what are the potential shipwrecks that are going to come? And then once you've sort of evaluated that through that rubric, then you can make an educated decision on whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I like that rubric. I will say, the three of us, I would say, I wouldn't describe the three of us as risk averse, right? Like, all of us are pretty comfortable with risk. But if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a lot of the DMO professionals that I've met over the years, and I hear that the outcome from the Pitbull situation is a realistic possibility, where even though we did everything right, we could lose our job or whatever. I don't know if I've heard a compelling enough reason to try something that might get me in trouble. So why not just go the comfortable route, do the boring campaign? Why not? Why take a risk? I don't know that I've heard the upside for somebody whose incentives don't necessarily match risk taking.
And there are degrees of risk, right? What we illustrated today, what Will's articulated, is the poster child of risks in this industry, right? It's the one that everyone has heard of, and is the cautionary tale. There are degrees of risk, and some of them are smaller, and so the potential downside and how you can mitigate the risk of that is pretty small. But I would argue, and this is called destination discourse, so it's okay for us to argue and disagree on this. I would argue that not taking a risk is the biggest risk you can take. If you only spend money on traditional, same old paid media, we talked about this last episode, paid media is getting more expensive. It's getting less impactful. It's harder to reach an audience. People are increasingly rejecting traditional advertising. There's more privacy restrictions and technical roadblocks to reach that audience. There's so many reasons that the money you spend today is less effective than it was a year ago. And that's not a new trend. It's a trend that's continued for a while and will continue indefinitely. And I think at the same time, we've got this disruption of how consumers are going to interact with information. We're moving from this question and answer interaction with computers in the form of search engines to a conversation in the form of AI. And that's going to accelerate dramatically when the next generation of iPhones come out. And so we're really we talked about this being an existential crisis last week, but we're looking down the barrel of an inevitable gun, which is advertising is going to be ineffective, and we're going to become obsolete as an industry and as an entity, as a DMO, if we don't take risks and evolve, if we don't try new things and find new ways to reach an audience and do great storytelling and find ways to infiltrate people's feelings, their thoughts, and their behaviors. If we can't impact those things anymore, then we won't exist, and every DMO in the world is going to get defunded. Like that's the end game that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Again, just looking at the cultural shift, and so before we got on the call, I asked AI kind of a little bit about why DMOs are risk averse by nature, public accountability, stakeholder pressure, fear of failure. Those are the kind of 3 reasons. And then, how do you encourage our DMOs to be a little bit more open to taking risk? And it's, highlight the success stories. It kind of goes to your point. If somebody else has done it and been successful and proven that it works, then it's okay. It's always the danger to be the first. I get that. Start small. Pilot programs, I think, again, is a great way to start dipping your toe into things. Demonstrate the ROI, and then most importantly was fostering the culture of experimentation, which I thought was again, it's getting used to that. It's getting used to the process, getting used to the rubric that you just outlined, I think was a great example. But here's a challenge that we're trying to address. We can do the same old boring stuff that we know is not going to really move the needle. We can try this little thing that's a little bit bolder. We can try something that's really dead on target, but it's it may or may not work, but it's the right message at the right reason for the right reason at the right time. So there's to your set levels of risk, I think is good. Obviously, I do believe that the how you tell stories has got to evolve. You've got to find that real connection. And I'm again more and more convinced of that. I mean, that's why I started this TV show, right? And there's a better way to tell destination stories, and how can we foster that and build it? I thank you again, Stuart, for taking that risk with us as we came and filmed an episode on location. But one of my big favorite stories about that is David Downing, our host, walking through saying, "I used to vacation here as a kid, and this is just blows me away." It's the emotion and the connection and the conversations were so robust and so cool that it told a great story that I don't think you could ever have in the back rooms of an ad agency kind of written that up. You can't fake the conversations with people. The World War II history at Myrtle Beach, I had absolutely no idea. I mean, what a cool, compelling story of the iconic area of your destination that nobody really knew. So yeah, I think the risk taking and the commitment to telling a story with a defined purpose and an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish is, you can't not go that way.
And Will, I like that a lot. I think putting myself in the shoes of every DMO professional, if my job is to make the community better, to make the lives of the residents better, I would much rather go down days of glory for something I did than fail doing nothing. And I think that's the risk that a lot of these DMO professionals take when they play it safe every time for self-preservation. You actually hurt the potential of what the community can become, and you're still failing. You're just failing by doing nothing, as opposed to the potential for failure by taking a risk. But the potential upside is so much greater if you're willing to do something that's outside of the norm and not just do it this way because we've always done it this way.
And I think especially when we talk leisure destinations, right? I mean, and this is all really specific to leisure marketing. I mean, you know, the destinations focus on the meeting space. I mean, they're taking risks all the time. You know, they're putting together these giant packages to bring, you know, to bid on big groups. I mean, talk about, you know, bidding on some of these massive citywides. I mean, those are risks and there's rewards to it. But people are kind of accustomed to that because it comes with these room night goals, right? And so that's easy. The challenge with leisure is like, okay, how are you going to prove this worked? And how do you come back? You say, I took a risk, made an investment to get, and we got 100,000 room nights at a need period, and 4 years down the road, there's an ROI associated. I mean, I think really tying any of these initiatives back to what are the ROI? What are we going to accomplish? What are we hoping to get? And having a metric tied to it. And I think if you do that, it does mitigate a lot of the risk. Now you might fail. It might not work. And I, you know, I'd rather fail forward. I tell a story. I was speaking at Destinations Florida a couple of years ago, and typically we kind of be the last speaker before the Visit Florida team would go. And I just listening to all the conversations, and my story was kind of an analogy to the space program and the Starliner program versus SpaceX. And you know, it was just fascinating to watch that entire thing play out. You know, SpaceX, Elon had launched that little baby Starship, and it would go up 20 feet and land, and then the next time it'd go up, you know, a mile and come down in a blaze of crash and glory. And he said it was a massive success. We learned so much. Next time it went up and almost landed. Next time it went up and landed, and then it blew up, and then they finally got it up and down. Now we're sending it off. I mean, and all the while Starliner finally gets to the space station and can't get back. Right. And so my message was be like Elon Musk. And I think there's a lesson there. Learn, don't be afraid to fail. And I think, you know, that getting over that fear of doing something that isn't 1,000% successful, but learning from it, applying that knowledge and tweaking it and moving forward and learning from it and moving forward. So I think, again, kind of starting small, doing some things, you know, look at your options, start small, get better at it, get bigger at it, get bigger at it. And then people also kind of get accustomed to, all right, they're doing some cool stuff. They're learning from it. They're telling us what they're learning from it, not just, oh, it's okay. You know, it's okay, but here's what, you know, we're going to target something a little bit different or tweak it a little bit more. And then I think you can build a culture of innovation, because you can't just come out of the gate with a Pitbull, the Sexy Beaches video. You've got to get people accustomed to understanding what you're doing, proving success of doing things in a little bit different way, more impactful way with higher profile, and getting success from those before you do something even bigger. That's
perfect mic drop moment, Will. Like, that's so good. I'm you know, I'm reminded of Master Yoda talking about fear is the path to the dark side. And I'm glad we weren't too fearful today. I'm glad we took a risk and brought on a third person on today's show. I've got to admit, it's way better talking to you than it is just me and Adam talking, because you have such a wealth of knowledge. You dramatically increased the IQ on this panel, and hopefully we won't get canceled as a result of it, because this has been phenomenal. We'd love to have you back on the show again in a later episode. If there's any other topics you want to touch on, we'd love to chat with you. So, Will, if people want to find you online, what's the best place to do it? And if you want to give a shout out, shameless plug to what you're up to, now's your chance.
Yeah. Well, LinkedIn's the best place to find me personally at Will Seccombe. And then definitely check out Undiscovered America TV. It's a new national television show going into season 2 in September. It airs 52 weeks a year, and it's on over 107 million households, and then plus all the streaming platforms. So it's a great opportunity, and you can check out all the season 1 episodes at undiscoveredamerica.tv.
Well, awesome. And if you want to watch the YouTube video, make sure to Google Sexy BEACHES.
Very good.
I want to see your history now on your browser, Adam. Adam, if they want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can email me at adam@reluctagency.com, or of course search Adam Stoker on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of content there. This was fun, Will. Had a blast.
Yeah, or find me on Tourism IQ.
That's right. Thank you, Will.
That's
Go to
right.
the
Founding
Tourism
contributor.
IQ and look up. Yeah, I'm a contributor there as well, and I believe as of last week, I was #1 on your leaderboard.
Oh,
Will,
wow. Look at you.
which means Will has the highest tourism IQ in the industry right now.
Wow.
Oh no, I
Look
got
at you.
passed by Joseph Trahan. Yeah. I'm
Oh,
number
shoot.
2.
You got work to do, Will.
I
All
got
right,
work
you
to
better
do.
go posting. If you guys want to check out Will's articles or Adam's articles, and the one article that Adam guilted me into writing, that's mytourismiq.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well at Stuart Butler, or you can email me stuart.butler@visitmyrtlebeach.com. And if you're looking for a great vacation, Myrtle Beach is a perfect place to bring your family to travel individually or as a couple. We'd love to host you here in Myrtle Beach. And if you're coming, let me know, and we'll see if we can curate a good experience for you. But thank you for tuning in today. Until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.